telling all these suckers where they at, man. Seeing through your cap, cause my vision is a CAT scan. Trying to get up in the game like I'm Pac-Man, so I'm blacking out on the track like I'm Batman.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Kase Court Podcast. It's your boy Kase, the realest basketball fan alive, and I'm live from Las Vegas, Nevada, West Side. Thank you for tuning in. This is season 3, episode 5, and I'm here with your boy Brax in Indiana. What's going on out there, man? How's the weather? Is it still cold out there?
No, man, it's pretty good today. It's like 58 all day. Everything melted, so that's nice.
Oh, man, that sounds good. That sounds good. So, and we got my boy Adrian out here in Colorado. What's going on, bro? I'm sure it's still snowing out there, huh?
I got the fresh snow going on right now, so I'm living the dream.
All right, man. I'm not surprised, but sounds good to hear. So, today is season 3, episode 5. Quick background of the podcast: we give detailed analysis of NBA rosters as we cover our fantasy basketball network called The Association. We got members from all parts of the world, all using real life salaries outside of the first one, because once you go cap, you don't go back. You feel me? And today, I got Brax and Adrian here for a specific reason, because our fantasy deadline just ended, the NBA trade deadline just ended, and we want to talk about the significant trades that occurred within that span and how the NBA trade deadline may have triggered some trades within our fantasy league. And then we'll wrap it up with the fantasy playoff picture, with the playoffs pretty much starting a week away from now. All-Star weekend just ended. Our fantasy playoffs is right around the corner. So, this is a pretty exciting time. Y'all ready to get up in this, Adrian and Brax? All right, for sure, man. I like the energy. So, first off, let's start off with the fantasy trade deadline and certain trades that were triggered by the NBA trade deadline. And the first one I want to bring up, well, we're going to start here with the court. And the first one I want to bring up here heavily involves my boy Brax, so he's going to be leading the way. And pretty much overall, like he owned Richaun Holmes for quite some time. I'll say over the past year or so. And after the Sacramento Kings making their moves and grabbing Sabonis, and Holmes just losing his role that he's had over the past 2 years, he decided to move him for Beef Stew, whose value is, I guess, relatively low at the time. People are kind of falling out on Beef Stew, and he actually ended up flipping that into Montrezl Harrell, who's on his favorite team, the Hornets. So that's the interesting thing that you pulled off there, to go from Holmes to Harrell. Do you want to talk about that trade, Brax?
Yeah, man. Can we pour one out for Richaun Holmes, please?
All right, man, I got you.
He really was one of my favorite fantasy players. Last year, even going into this year, and to start this year, it was really going off. And he had an eye thing that he was dealing with for a while. He missed like a month with some eye issue, and then his minutes were low, and then he got COVID, and he just really was having a down year. And then I had high hopes, or not high hopes really, but I didn't think that after they traded for Sabonis, I thought maybe they were going to try and play him and Holmes together and not as a direct backup. But he played something like 13 minutes. The first game with Sabonis, and I was like, ooh, this might be the time where I finally cut bait. I dropped him in the redrafts that I was in. It was very sad to see him go. But I was able to salvage a little bit of value for him in Isaiah Stewart, who is on a little bit of a hot streak right now. It's kind of funny how the league, there's this league-wide consensus that Isaiah Stewart is trash, except for the one guy who has him, which is JB. JB loves him.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is, Brax?
I like JB. Coming into the season, he was getting way overdrafted in redraft leagues. People were looking at 65, 70 as where maybe he'd finish. And then Olynyk went down early in the season, and people were like, all right, here we go. He's about to take off. And it really didn't affect him at all. And, people think he is undersized for a big at 6'8", but he doesn't really shoot threes. So, it's weird. I don't know if he's the long-term solution at center for them. What kind of scared me off of it was kind of the Mitchell Robinson rumors that were going around for Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get, at least for this season, they're going to give him all the minutes he can handle. Going in the future, I mean, who knows? I don't think he's as bad as everybody says he is, but at least for me personally, the reason I hopped off of the train early this season was because I had him in redraft and I overdrafted him, and I was a little bit upset by that. So,
okay, yeah. Honestly, I feel like there's something I call the pendulum theorem, right? Theory, where it's like opinions just swing from one end to the other. So, especially like if someone's being underrated, right, and people start to see him play well, for some reason the pendulum just swings all the way, and everybody falls in love with them, and they become overrated to some degree. And on the flip side, when someone's slightly overrated for whatever reason, and people start to notice the flaws in them, the pendulum just swings all the way to a point where they become actually underrated. So,
that's so true.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing with Beef Stew. I think the most apparent story you could look at is the Carmelo Anthony story, and see how the opinions have swayed on him, and they just go from one extreme. Yeah, they just go from one extreme to the other, and that's what you see kind of play out with Beef Stewart. But overall, I think people fell in love with him simply because of his role in Detroit as a starting center, and just the upside of his abilities, because he could get some rebounds, he can get some blocks, and he can knock down some threes. So those kind of bigs have a lot of upside. That's why there's such an appeal in like Zach Collins when he's returning for the San Antonio Spurs. So, once people start to realize, the things that Brax just highlighted here, which is he's an undersized big. He's not all that skilled to overcome that undersizedness or whatever to call that. And we're just seeing, okay, we're noticing the flaws and seeing, okay, this role that he has probably isn't going to last too long. So that's kind of why the stock has fallen on him to go all the way.
To be fair, though, can we all acknowledge that he has a relentless motor that he proved earlier this season?
Right, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, he plays hard.
I mean, if he gets hit in the face, he's going to go after his abuser,
That's a good one. That's a good one. And I guess the last thing I wanted to highlight in this trade is how you feeling about Harrell's value, Brex?
Dude, I've always been a Montrez guy. I actually got sniped for him in the inaugural startup draft in like the third round or something by somebody who's not even in the league anymore. And I remember being so upset and being like, because he had paired like Ben Simmons and Montrez.
Oh, that was Cash, right? That was Cash. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I was like, damn, that's a good pairing right there. And I was like, damn, I wish I did that.
Yeah.
Well, who got him in the end? It's me. So I'd say that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and he's on your favorite team. That's the icing on the cake right there.
Exactly.
So, honestly, with Harrell, he had that hot streak in Washington in the beginning of the season, and I was kind of riding that in the bubble. But overall, I didn't know how his role is going to manifest long term. So, I wasn't really a big Harrell guy because I kind of, and it's funny because I think there's a relation, like the way I saw Harrell is kind of similar to how I see Beef Stew, right? Is that I saw that Harrell played hard, but he just had these, like he was undersized. And I guess the difference between Harrell and Beef Stew is that Harrell does have some on-ball skills to kind of overcome that undersizedness. So that's the difference. But I did kind of see them in a similar lens in that, they're undersized. So chances are they're going to be backup centers. And the value while they're starters or getting like starter value it is a good time to, I guess, move from there. But Charlotte is a perfect place for him to go because, as you see it playing out is, they will start like Plumlee, but Harrell will probably get the bulk of the minutes just because of the energy he'll provide for that young team.
Well, recently, too, they've been playing Harrell and Plumlee next to each other for really long stretches.
That's interesting to see how that plays out.
I don't know if working is the correct word because they're 1-9 over their last 10, but it's not working.
Okay. But yeah, that was just let's move on to the next trade over here. This one is involving my boy Adrian. So I hope you're ready to talk about this. This one involves a swap of LeBron James for Paul George. Which is interesting. That's pretty nice to pull off because I honestly thought a lot of owners who own Paul George were kind of screwed with holding him, and they would have to hold him through the offseason or sell like really low. But so to get someone like LeBron James who could go bonkers in the playoffs is pretty interesting for your win now approach. Did you want to talk about that, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, you basically hit it on the head there. Like, I had a couple unfortunate, injuries to some stars on my team. So I think Lillard was another one that I traded a little bit earlier, a few weeks ago. And I just felt like I didn't quite have enough to actually make a good run, a deep run in the playoffs, with just holding Paul George there in IR. So, funny enough, was talking to a fellow competitor in the Warriors with Rish, and he decided to take the chance. It's obviously a very, very short-term focused move, trading away George and Barton. Lowry's also quite old, so I wasn't too upset about that one, for basically LeBron and some change. So, I might be regretting this one in a year or 2 years from now, but I think if it pays off this offseason, it'll be well worth it.
I mean, no, it makes sense, honestly, because, I mean, to be honest, Rish has been trying to move LeBron for a while now. He's
man, I wish I knew that.
Yeah, I mean, he knows the clock is ticking right now. But I mean, here's the thing:
hey, you gotta give me the inside scoop, man. What are we doing here?
Nah, I'm definitely not helping you with trades. So with Paul George, it makes sense to take on that risk and be like, okay, that was a smart move for Rich, honestly, to kind of take that risk and be like, chances are he's probably not going to play, and it definitely hurts his chances of winning this year. But I think if he still has Harden, and having Harden and Paul George kind of on the same, I would say like around the same age, is really good on his end to kind of open his championship window a little bit more. And just, I mean, you taking LeBron, that makes sense because of your ability to make trades happen. So
yeah, I could see myself definitely moving LeBron maybe in the offseason or some point next season if the timing is right and it makes sense. But I do love LeBron, so it's also fun to own. So I'm not necessarily upset about it.
Yeah,
so we'll see. I was under the impression that George was not. Basically, I sort of kind of accepted that he was not going to come back, and it seems like some news that came out yesterday or something hints that he may be returning, but I just sort of assumed he's basically done for at least the fantasy year.
They've been playing games.
Adrian, that news actually came out before you traded him, just so you know.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure it came out yesterday, and the deadline was over a week ago, so...
the one where he would need the 2-week ramp-up period?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pre-deadline, man.
I see it yesterday on Fantrax.
All right. We'll just, I guess, disagree on that.
So that's another inside scoop he missed on that trade.
Oh dear, I'm losing my touch.
I mean, I kind of see this similar to, how I just see LeBron going to your team. I think his value goes a little bit up because your ability to move him. And it kind of reminds me of like when OKC kind of trades, the real OKC trades for like a rookie draft pick. The value to me goes up because of their ability to draft certain players. So, yeah, the trade makes sense both ways, honestly, especially with where you're sitting in regards to the playoff race. And I mean, we'll talk about that later. But let's move on to the next trade. I believe this one you're also involved in too, which was the moving of Jalen Green. And I'm always interested to see his value and how much he costs because, I always got my eye on trying to get Jalen Green, but I'm probably not going to pay up. But go ahead and talk about this and your perspective on
sure.
the moves. Mm-hmm.
I had actually talked with Joy about potentially giving him Green just because he has a lot of he's a very, very young team and is probably at least a couple of years out from even trying to compete. But who knows with Joy? He likes Green. He's a fan of him. And some other conversations that I had about potentially moving Green for somewhat of a more like win now resource. I was surprised at how low his value was, which sort of makes sense and with sort of what you talked about, Kase, about the pendulum theory, right? Like he hasn't been really playing well this season. Doesn't mean next season he can't break out and he could be the star that he was hyped up to be. But with where he was at right now, I just sort of had some concerns around him actually getting to that point. And so, in being impatient and how I am, I decided to make a move. And I think I just got a ton of picks, like 3 firsts, but one of them is Joy's pick, which is basically like just about a top lotto or top odds lotto. So I figured it was just more so like I'll take the chance and see, take my hand at a top 4 pick hopefully, and maybe even just trade that pick in the offseason. Who knows? But, it was more so I'm not sure about Jalen Green myself in terms of fantasy value, so decided to cut ties before it got worse.
Yeah, he doesn't really have the best fantasy profile, but he does have that upside of a player where it still might cost a little bit to get him.
Can I say something about this trade, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't understand this at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. Jalen Green this season has been one of the most negatively impactful players for a fantasy team. And obviously, the Joy who traded for him is not in a position to be competing. But Jalen Green is one of those guys who's harming your team more than is help it. I think his ceiling in fantasy is about a Devin Booker, like in the 30 to 25, 30 range. He's going to have to add something to his game to get him higher than that. And to me, maybe I get trading the 1 first, which, by the way, is going to be top 4. I don't know if we remember this, but the top 4 picks all have an equal shot to get the first overall pick, right? But adding in
top 4 now, isn't it top 3?
I'm pretty sure it's top 4. Kase, do you know the answer to that?
Oh, as far
I think
as
it's top 3
in the lottery,
top 3 have the same lotto odds, the highest, and then they kind of start slowly going down.
Top 3. It's top 3. Top 3 have 14%.
Yeah. But regardless, it's definitely up there.
The pick is top 3 at this point. It's locked in at top 3 at this point. So what I don't understand is trading that pick plus the 2 firsts on top of it, right? Where you could get a Chet Holmgren with that pick or a Paolo with that pick, right?
It's all a risk thing, though, right, Brax? Like from Joy's perspective, like he has no rush in Jalen Green needing to be good now, and so he's totally fine with being patient and seeing if he can take the step to become a Devin Booker-ish player.
Right.
But the pick comes with risk, right? Because yes, it has top 3 odds, but we've seen in the past couple of years when they made this change, a top 3 pick land number 6, land number 7, and a pick's value from the 1, 2, 3 towards the 5 and beyond changes drastically, right? And so I think it was also from his perspective I don't want this to just become a bad pick with the lotto and just be unfortunate. So he was sort of offloading risk from that perspective.
Yeah, but you're implying you're paying as the 2 firsts are implying that the pick has already fallen out of the top 3, right?
I get Brax's point. Yeah,
you're paying the lowest possible value on this pick before it's even been determined where the pick is, right?
I mean, I made the trade for a reason. I agree with you. I think I got a good deal.
I'm saying from the Jalen Green perspective, I don't understand it at all. I don't think the ceiling is there for him to crack anything higher than like I said, 25-30. And when you have a top pick like that, you want a guy who's going to potentially jump into the top 10. You look at LaMelo, you look at the prospects for Evan Mobley, maybe he can get there. Cade Cunningham, all these guys are contributing in multiple categories. Jalen Green's going to have to step up his efficiency, his assists, his steals. Maybe he sprinkles in some blocks. Right now, it's not there, and I don't know if him and the Kevin Porter Jr. backcourt is going to give him that opportunity to get there. So I just don't like it. I'm so low on Jalen Green for fantasy. This year and the next 2 years too.
And it makes sense because like I highlighted earlier, he doesn't have the best fantasy profile for category leagues. And I mean, it's interesting that you brought up the Devin Booker comparison because I think that's an interesting one because a lot of people like to compare him to Anthony Edwards because of how close he was to him in the draft and just because Edwards is the previous year. And that's I guess that's just recency bias to think this might be how he might play out as far as his next year or two or whatever. But
Right.
but yeah,
I love Edwards.
yeah, but I'm with you in that I think the Devin Booker is definitely more of a closer comparison because of especially how he's being used right now. You know, it kind of reminds me of how Devin Booker was being used in his first year or two. So yeah, that's an interesting comparison. And I know a lot of people might look at athleticism and think that Jalen Green compares more to Anthony Edwards, athletic wise. But I don't know, man. When I was watching the All-Star game last night, when I saw Devin Booker catch a couple oops, I was like, man, he got some hidden athleticism there that he doesn't like bringing out too much.
Yeah.
You know, so
you guys know I can't talk about Devin Booker.
Can't talk about Devin Booker?
Wait.
I can't talk about Devin Booker.
Elaborate why? Oh, is it because of a potential trade you made, or I remember you trading Luka for Booker?
I told this.
But what
I told this story a few times, but it was basically like a long time ago, like the year that
in the
Booker got the 70
playoffs.
points. Yeah, it was in fantasy playoffs, and I dropped Booker because he was like in and out like every other game.
Yeah,
and my opponent picked him up, and that's when he dropped the 70, and I lost because of that. Yeah,
dude,
I've never owned Booker since.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's funny we did have this convo because I shared my transgression at the same time, in that my opponent in the playoffs dropped 70 on me, and I was screwed in points and threes or whatever, and I ended up dropping Oladipo and going for some more efficiency, and then he picked up Oladipo, who went like 1 for 9 on the Sunday, and ended up helping me win field goal percentage. So that was
So Kase, you and I will never own Devin Booker. I think we should make a pact on that.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I might grab him when he's like 29 and people thinking his career's over.
It's on the downward trend.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the next trade here, and this is one I guess that I found interesting, which is the Anthony Simons for Kendall Johnson and a mid first. And I know a second round pick went the other way, but I mean, guess that's the Maverick second round pick, which is probably like in the 50s.
He's probably not even gonna. That sounds like a drop. Whoever gets picked with that.
Yeah, I mean, but you never know. Yeah, you never know what you can snatch at the end of the draft. So
right.
I mean, I don't want to just snatch. I guess disregard the value of that. But overall, yeah, I love the side of Keldon Johnson in the first. Because that first is like a mid first. It's not even like a late first. It's more like a mid first. So even though this draft, I feel like it's kind of lottery heavy, then once you kind of fall out of the lottery, it kind of dies down a little bit. So, I mean, you might be able to get like a lottery type of pick with this pick right here. So, I mean, I just like it just in the fact of, you know, selling high and buying low on players. And, you know, Keldon Johnson.
I'm going to disagree.
Oh yeah, okay. And that's the thing. I do see the other perspective. I'll allow you to elaborate on the other side of the fence. But I mean, I guess for me, I just look at what Keldon Johnson costed at the beginning of the season, and even though I'm not a fan of his fantasy profile, I still believe that the Spurs are invested in him to a degree. So we'll see how much that plays out, and I do wonder like how much they are invested in Simons. I mean, this could be, you know, he's arrived, you know, officially, but you know, at the end of the day, Dame is still there. So are they going to run with the Dame Simons backcourt? Are they going to moving him or so? I just like the value that Sixers is getting just because they're taking and getting. And just thinking about how these values can manifest over time, to get Keldon in that mid first, I feel like you can get an Anthony Simons with that mid first over there. But Brax,
go ahead. Pendulum theory again, Kase.
Yeah, that pendulum. Yeah, but go ahead and Brax and explain your part, and Adrian will wrap it up with the pendulum theory that he's talking about. So,
I mean, we've seen a few of these now where it's like. That we've seen, but there's been a few trades that have gone down now where it's like it's a good win now move for one side as well as, you know, in the future. I don't think Keldon Johnson ever touches what Anthony Simons is doing right now at any point in his career, right? And I think for Brett, the Celtics, he's making a playoff run, right, to consolidate I guess, the first in Keldon Johnson into the upgrade in Anthony Simmons, who is just going, everybody knows he's going nuclear right now. It's a good win now move for the rest of the season, obviously with Damian Lillard out, right? And then also in the future, I think I don't think Keldon Johnson ever ranks higher than Anthony Simmons ever from now until the end of their careers. The fantasy profile, like you mentioned, is not there on Keldon Johnson. He's not shooting. I mean, he's shooting some threes now, but it's dragging his field goal down a little bit. The steals aren't there. The assists aren't there. There's no blocks, right? If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure his free throw isn't the best either. Let me double check here. Free throw, 74% on decent volume. So, not ideal. So I just don't think he has. I think it's Anthony Simmons. I think that side wins easily.
Okay. Oh man,
I think it was a good trade for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kase and I believe a little bit more in Keldon than it seems like Brax does, and he's still also very young, so he can definitely grow into it. I don't know. I don't think I have anything bad to say about either side. I mean, it definitely makes sense for Brett with what he did and going for the win now move with how Simmons is popping off, and he will for the rest of this season for sure, at least. But in terms of like long term, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, you were. I'll let you finish.
I was going to say, in terms of like long term outlook for like what the Sixers got, I think it's also fine if he can hit with that pick and Keldon becomes a stronger player. If Simmons gets into a situation now where he's not the only person who's expected and responsible for scoring, I could see him coming back down to earth.
Yeah, and definitely, and as far as Simmons, even though he did trade Keldon, who we're talking about his future, and a first who's like a young prospect. I mean, it's not like Simmons is old; he's still like 22, I believe. So
that's true.
I mean, it's not like he's still got a young asset with potential to if he keeps this type of role and keeps this going on to some degree. Yes, it's a win for him still long term. So it makes sense for me. I guess for both sides, but. It's just interesting to see. Yeah, it's just interesting to see how much Anthony Simmons cost at this juncture.
Part of the risk with that first too is that you could draft maybe a Kai Jones, for example. And,
here we go.
Becomes a rotation guy. You know what I mean?
Are you saying he did the opposite? Like the draft pick value does the opposite on his team? He's gonna pick a bust.
No, I'm not calling anybody out specifically. I'm just saying, you see Kai Jones going around 13, 14, which is even a little bit earlier than where that pick is going to be, right? You could draft a Kai Jones, for example, and I'm a Hornets fan. I'm not even sure if Kai Jones is going to be a rotation guy ever. So I'm just saying that's part of the risk with that first there.
I mean, yeah, I got JT Thor with a second round pick, and he's about to have a bigger role than Kai Jones.
Awesome. He's so great.
but yeah, let's move on. We've kind of ran almost 30 minutes here, but let's move on to the bubble. And I guess the first trade I want to talk about here was actually sparked by the trade deadline with Norman Powell and him going to the Clippers. And I mean, I was kind of upset that a contender in Brax went and grabbed Norman Powell with his new role. And but it was funny how you went ahead and turned that into Kuzma, after the Beal injury. So go ahead and talk about that, Brax, and what was your thought process behind that?
It's funny that you say it's funny because immediately, we're talking day after for both Powell and Gordon Hayward, they suffer significant injuries immediately after a trade.
Right. So you traded away Powell right before he got hurt?
Yeah, the day before. Same thing with Gordon Hayward.
Yeah, he traded Hayward, and then he got hurt that day. His knee, before the trade.
It was an ankle thing, but it did not look good.
Okay, but it was before the trade even was done processing. Hayward got hurt, and then So yeah, go ahead. You were kind of you avoided the hot seat on that one, Brax.
Yeah, man. I mean, Hayward. I was trying to move Hayward. I had a lot of Hornets on my team, which is never a bad thing, right? But I felt like I needed to move him. Powell, I mean, I'm not going to speak too much on Powell because I own him for a day, but Powell is a good efficiency guy. He's locked in that long 5-year contract. So obviously there's a lot of value even there for somebody who's like, hovers in the 65-70 range, and on the 4th or 5th year of his contract, he's going to make it only like $20 million, right? But then you look at Kuzma, who me specifically, I wanted Kuzma just for the boards, and I feel like the counting stats are going to be a big thing. And also, his playoff schedule is a lot better than Norman Powell's this year. So I was kind of thinking there. Kuzma, to me, is one of those where it's like his actual value maybe not outranks, but is just worth more than his category rank, where his turnover is a little high and his free throws a little low. So it kind of drags him down in category. He's ranked on 80 range right now, but to me, his worth is higher than some of those guys who are also in that range, just based on his potential to rack up the counting stats. And now with Beal out, he's hitting these dimes. I mean, the first game I had him, he had a triple double. So
yeah. So I mean, the whole Beal from Kuzma. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to get Kuzma due to the Beal injury, but it'll be interesting to see how you end up moving this long term, if you end up holding him or moving him for a different piece. But overall, yes. I mean, honestly, with me, I would have loved to hold on to Powell, but I mean, you definitely dodged a bullet by moving on to Kuzma.
man, I really did. I felt really bad. Not so much the second time, because Brett wasn't really primed for a playoff run this year, but the first time I definitely felt pretty bad. Then I got over it.
And I guess another X factor with that Kuzma is Porzingis and whether they end up playing him or not. Whether they're just blowing smoke with he's going to return. If he doesn't return, that's going to help Kuzma a lot. And it'll be interesting to see how Porzingis' role is if he does end up playing, because I did consider moving him, but I didn't think it was worth it due to just what his role might be in Washington, whether he does play this because if he does play this season, the upside is just too much to, I guess, let go of, and I don't want to sell him on the discount of he might get shut down, and just him, just it's worth it to hold him and see him in this long-term role, especially in my position in the playoff, because it's not good to make a all-in win-now move for me right now, so.
Brax, I'll be honest, I'm looking at your team now. I realized I have no idea what your bubble team looks like anymore.
Yeah, it's a lot different now.
Pretty good.
Thank you. It's a lot different. I've been working pretty hard the past few. It's actually all of it within the last 2 weeks. So.
Well, I think it's interesting because I feel like a lot of the trades that you've done in bubble are just low key, and it's just one at a time, and they're more sporadic. There's nothing that's whoa, he just traded away Towns. They're just all kind of the mid range kind of guys, the third, fourth best players on your team. There's been a lot of shuffling there, and you put yourself a very nice, good core of 5, 6 guys to probably take you deep into the playoffs. So it should be interesting because I think we're going to be on the same side of the bracket.
Hopefully not, but that's kind of what I was. That's what I was lacking was just kind of the depth that I really felt comfortable with. It's something I think people overlook is I mean, maybe this has been touched on a ton, but those really low key guys like a Lance Stevenson or a Garrison Matthews at this point are going to be super clutch late in the season when it's you have a low game day, but thank God I have Lance Stevenson playing in round 3 of the playoffs on this one day. So.
Yeah. It's just there's a lot of guys that, and that's what I've kind of been playing through with my team is that when you look at my team, it's not a lot of guys that you like, but it's just at certain times people get different opportunities, and it's just being in tune and just starting the right guys. For sure. So
we talk about it every time, but I do not understand how good your team is for what I see on the screen. It just does not align.
It doesn't make sense at all.
I hope for your sake Porzingis comes back and you make a run because it would be so epic.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, when you look at my team, it looks like this is just gonna crash. But it's funny because I did make some silent trades before the deadline happened too, and it was more to kind of help my playoff, I guess, run. or whatever. So, I mean, it was mainly in the first round though, because I was looking at the first round like, all right, like I shouldn't worry too much about second and third round because that's putting the expectations too high. But I should at least
get there first.
Yeah, but I should at least maximize my first round chances and just see how the rest plays out. So. But yeah, let's move on to, I guess, the next topic, which is the big three-way trade that involved LaVine, Zion, and KD. Did any of you have any big comments to make? Like, Brax?
Oh yeah, that was a massive one.
Yeah, classic rebuilding move. You know, you take Zion, he's got the top 15 potential, one of the best young stars in the league, and then you move him for a 34-year-old Kevin Durant. I mean, if it's me and I'm rebuilding, I'm doing that every time. I love 34-year-old Kevin Durant with injury issues, man, on a $40 million contract. That's all me. Mm-hmm. That's all me. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, for me personally, I actually moved away from KD just because.
Wait, Brax, you were being sarcastic, right?
No, I think it's terrible. I don't understand. It makes zero sense to me at all. I don't know why you move Zion for Kevin Durant in a rebuild. So, thank God I can pair Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard. Those guys maybe get 15 games together.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think Troy is looking at it from perspective of, okay, how quick can I turn around this team? Like, I mean, that's the thing. He's just trying to shoot for upside. So if he's going KD, Kawhi, and I know we're wondering how many games they actually play, but I guess on top of that, if you look at his team, he still has who is it? Mobley and Barnes, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So and he still has some draft picks. So I think he's looking at it from just a salary perspective.
He's going to go win now next year for sure.
Yeah, he's going to go win now.
And then he'll change his mind midway through the year, and then he'll change back and go at deadline. And
I mean,
we never know where Detroit will be.
Yeah,
so it's funny when I first saw this trade, I thought that the trio of Zaire, Horder, and First were also going to Detroit. And so I was talking to him, and I was like, "Dude, nice job! Like that was a great return for Zion. Who knows if if he's gonna come back, what he's gonna come back like?
Right.
He's been out all year." And then I realized that all of that went to the Lakers and T-Bone. Because I was like, T-Bone, you never trade, and this is what you decided to come back with? And then when I saw that he got all of that too, I was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense now. So I think T-Bone probably was the one who came out on top. I think, honestly, it was really good for Mr. Black too, going in, basically going all in for the playoffs and trying to make an upset in the first round. So it should be interesting. But yeah, I'm definitely confused a little bit about it from T-Choi's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, when I first saw the trade at a glance, I'm always looking at what Magic is doing. Like, since the draft, I always pay attention whenever he made a move. So when I saw him pull LaVine and Wendell, I'm like, how did he get LaVine and Wendell? But then I saw he did give up quite a bit to balance it out. So I don't want to say anybody ran away with the steal here. I think the value all kind of balances out. But it's interesting how you guys criticize Choi's approach. It's almost like if Kanye West owned a team in our league, like it would be Troy just because of the moves he makes.
Yeah, it's very short-sighted to me, and I also want to make the point that I'm not doing it because it's him, right? Yeah. I think if anybody made this trade, I'd probably be I'm almost disappointed with it. I think if anybody, if Adrian, if you made that trade, I'd be like, and you're in a similar situation, I'd be like, that's terrible. So I don't want it to seem like I'm picking on him or anything, even though it might seem like that. But I just think objectively, I think it's bad.
And the thing is, I think sometimes you just have to learn from lessons. Maybe he's never owned a team where he had so many upside guys.
Just not own a team at all, you mean?
No, well, just to own a team where there's so many guys with a lot of upside, but they're too injury prone.
Right.
And ended up just kind of ruining your whole playoff.
I guess it just feels like he went from a very young, sort of still in the prospect phase, very injury prone guy in Zion, to a much older, also injury prone guy. If Durant was if Durant was consistently healthy and he had that reputation of he's always available, I could see it more if he's going for a big run next year. But that's the thing. If Durant and you mentioned Brax, he also has Kawhi, where is he realistically going to be in the middle of the season next year?
Yeah, and I think he's just looking at it from perspective of he has the cap to do it. So, I mean, if
I honestly think it was just Zion nerves.
Yeah,
I think he just wanted to get rid of him if he doesn't come back, or what's going on. It's
like his
sort of
value
similar to what I mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
it can only drop. Sort of what I mentioned with Jalen Green, where I felt like it's kind of like now or never. I think he maybe felt like that and didn't want to hold him and hear more bad news.
Exactly.
Going into the offseason, now like Zion's worth nothing.
Yeah, because Zion's the type of guy where his stock could just tumble quick, where it's like
right.
If he doesn't play the rest of the season and then we go into the off season and we just keep hearing bad stories about him, like he's going to be stuck with him and going into next season.
Right.
I know he probably that's a good point.
I feel like what he should have done was just because Detroit didn't really get. I mean, I guess it might have been hard to get buy-in from T-Bone, but I feel like if he did just like a straight like Zion Levine swap or something like that, I'd probably like that more for him than just getting Durant.
Makes sense. All right, so I guess the next trade I wanted to talk about, or the most significant one, last significant one in the bubble, was the Paul George for Toppins, Reddish, and THT. What do you think about that, Adrian? Who do you think won on that one?
I mean, I think value-wise, I think everyone was pretty clear that Nate definitely got the best of Ben. I think Ben sort of was. I think he started the year and was like in top 10, was doing pretty well, and then got some major injuries, and McConnell and George and I think a couple others as well, and so he just kind of given up. And I think he's taken that the last couple of weeks like to the extreme of just like I'm just fire sailing anyone over like 26 years old. And so I don't know. He's a Knicks fan, so maybe Toppin, Reddish, he values him higher than what most people do.
That makes sense. And Reddish does have the upside.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, Reddish does definitely have upside, but I think for George could probably have gotten more from a value perspective.
Yeah.
But then you do have to take into account the consideration of the contract, right? Like we just talked about Detroit taking Durant. Like that is a very hard contract to trade. Not many people can just take a $40 million contract, and so George is like right behind him in the a 38 range or something like that.
Exactly, and that's I think that's the big part here. With if Ben was here, that's what he would highlight, in that he was just opening up cap space,
and that there weren't other suitors, right? So I sort of get it. I think if I were in Ben's position, I might have just held on to George until he was like playing better and healthy, and maybe tried getting him in the off season or something like that. So I think he rushed it. But all things considered, it's not necessarily a awful trade if Reddish does jump up, if THT does jump up. I'm not sure about Toppin, but the other two definitely have potential.
Okay, and I guess the last two trades that were, I guess, potentially triggered by the trade deadline was I saw Montrezl Harrell was moved similarly, within his new role in Charlotte, and seeing Brissett was actually an interesting one that I saw being moved, as far as with Sabonis leaving and just the whole chunk of big men out there in Indiana, and seeing like how much each one will be worth. So,
Brax, you got Harrell in both?
Oh yeah. very under the radar, though. Very under the radar.
Apparently, I didn't even realize.
So I mean, Brax, is any comments on that Harrell trade, or is it kind of similar?
It was actually there's a lot of moving pieces in it. It moved like Olynyk. Oh man, there's probably 8 or 9 moving pieces in that trade.
Daniels, Killian Tilly, David Duke in a second. I think you definitely got the by far best piece in the trade. It was definitely a good move.
Yeah, what I really like about that one, at least on the other side, is that he took Tilly and immediately flipped him for Frank Jackson, who I think is a little bit of an underrated fantasy guy. Harrell. I've always been a Harrell guy, and then him going to the Hornets really motivated me to make that trade. Adrian, you said Olynyk? You saw Olynyk was in that too?
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it felt pretty fair. He needed a little bit of injection of youth. He's a big Olynyk guy. I mean, I am as well, but
And I guess I guess, did you want to finish that sentence right there? Or
Yeah, I just think it's impressive. I think Olynyk has got a little bit of value next year as well. I think it's impressive, even in his. He's having a major slump right now, but he's still racking up assists. He's getting 4, 5, 6 assists a game, playing limited minutes too. And I think they signed him to that contract with the idea that he was going to be traded, like how they kind of did with Plumlee. I think if he gets moved to someone where he potentially could be playing a bigger role on a team that actually matters. Then, we all know what happened last year. Obviously, that wasn't a team that was playing for anything, right? But if he gets a little bit more minutes, he's kind of had this really late breakout in his career. He wasn't doing this earlier in his career. It's really interesting.
Yeah, he was just known as like a playoff beast, where it was like he was there like as a muscle guy who didn't really rack up stats. So it's interesting to see him go to Miami and develop his game. Because it's really in Miami where his game really started to blossom, and then when he got the big role in Houston, we saw the upside of what he could do. He was like Baby Jokic, or should I say Papa Jokic, to a degree. So
extreme case, but yes, he had a good run.
I mean, Brax owned him. I mean, am I going too far by saying he was
No, man, he took me to a finals. He took me to a finals. So,
he was going ham.
I had a little bit of emotional attachment there for me.
So he took you to the finals where you lost to Jokic.
That's funny. but here's the thing: is that I guess the convo on Olynyk in that his role seems like trash right now with the front court being clogged up. But this is why I kind of like my team is you just grab guys that are good in fantasy and wait for the opportunity to come, because you never know if injury happen, or even if it's not major injuries, like we come in one night, Bagley and Isaiah Stewart are out, and you're playing Brax in the playoffs, like sheesh, I know Olynyk's about to get this 35-minute night, so I think it's good to just hold on to good guys that are good in fantasy, that are good in cat leagues, and just wait for their opportunity. So but go ahead.
I'm eager for some tea in March Madness. I have no idea what's going on in there. And
I guess I just wanted to shout out Troy. One last quick was I'm just seeing Brissett he got for a second, and then going ahead and flipping that to move up 10 spots in the first. I think that
was like 3 hours later he did that. I think.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good move by him, and just seeing the value of Brissett in that clogged up Indiana Pacers, whatever. But yeah, like you said, moving on to March Madness. I guess the main trade that I saw here was the Ben Simmons trade, and it's funny how I woke up in the morning and I saw that transaction, and I was like, like that's interesting to see how much Ben Simmons went for. I mean, do you have the trade in front of you, Adrian?
I do, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So Ben Simmons was traded away by Elton to Ian over Texas A&M, and Ian gave him Norman Powell, which I think was before the injury too, in terms of value at the time. Gafford and a first. Now that first is currently fourth best odds.
Right.
So we're talking like top pick, along with Powell, who just got traded to the Clippers before injury, and Gafford as well. So everyone was scratching their heads as far as Simmons or what he went for. Given that he still hasn't played.
Too high or too low?
I think he definitely way overpaid. In my opinion.
And what's interesting is this, okay, because I woke up in the morning, and this is, I guess, my personal vendetta with this is that because I drafted Ben Simmons in this, right? So when I traded Ben Simmons to Ethan, right? It was for I gave him Ben Simmons and Ball for Zach LaVine. And everybody went bonkers, like, whoa, what is this? Like, this is just ridiculous. Like they're saying that it was like a highway robbery or whatever that I was able to pull LaVine out from Ben Simmons. So I wake up in the morning and I see this Ben Simmons trade. I'm like, wait, hold up. And I go to the chat and no one's saying anything.
No, we did. There was definitely some chatter about it.
Well, here's the thing. here's the thing. When I was looking at it, I was monitoring to see how people were going to respond, and no one was saying anything. So I was actually the first person to speak up. And I was like,
Oh,
wow. I was like, wow, that's a lot of
Got it,
value
you
for
kicked
Ben
it up.
Simmons. How the value changes so quickly.
Well, so what's really interesting, right, is like, you know, just about everyone in the league and most people in general are much more familiar with the value that, you know, comes along with just category leagues. And so when you think about it from a point system, I know historically Simmons was like roughly like a 40-ish point per game player when he was at his like, you know, peak in Philly. Powell has like barely ever eclipsed 30. Gafford is like in the like mid to high 20s. So those two pieces are just sort of like role players, but not like a core piece from a points value perspective. But that pick, you know, you look at, you know, it being someone in the range of a, you know, Mobley or, you know, honestly like Halliburton or, you know, guys like that, because this is going to be, you know, a likely top 5 pick. That I think is the key asset that I'm like, why are we moving that for someone who still hasn't played? Because if Simmons was healthy and playing and was hitting those consistent 40 a night, wouldn't necessarily be, I think, a bad trade at all. But the fact that there is so much question, you're trading for his peak value. And I think you should never be trading for someone at their peak value because then you can't, quote unquote, win or you can't improve off of that.
Yeah, it's almost like, because I mean, when I look at the trade, I'm like, these are like, okay, obviously, like you said, like that top 5 pick is the core piece of that trade for the other side. But I mean, I'm looking at the other pieces. I'm like, I mean, these pieces could be the core. Like, you could make a trade around these as well, like with Norman Powell, and like, you know how you say he was just hovering around 30 in Portland. But I mean, after Dame got hurt and everything, like he was starting to go above 30 and be more around, I'll say like 35 probably. And then when we went. And then after the trade to the Clippers, like this was the trade like after he was going bonkers after the trade in the Clippers. So I believe he had like a couple 40-point games and whatnot. And I was just looking at what Norman Powell could do in the playoffs without Paul George and Kawhi. Like they weren't going to be around during the fantasy playoffs. I mean, probably like a 5% chance for Paul George or any of that. But it's interesting to see like how this trade, I guess, over time, like this trade actually aged well. I will say it's just at the moment. I mean, it aged well because of what happened to Norman Powell's injury and how that shut down his upside to finish out the season.
It's like but like I think I'm totally in agreement with you, Kase. There, like he's not. I don't think it's necessarily like an awful trade in terms of like what it will become, assuming Simmons obviously comes back and plays well. But at this point in time, with what the value was, like you just could have gotten him for so much less, I think.
I gotta jump in. I think it's really interesting how, you know, in this trade, you guys are harping on that top pick, right? Top 5 pick, right? But then we go back to the Jalen Green trade earlier in the court, and it's like, oh no, that pick, you know, that could fall out to number 5 or number 6, so that pick's not worth that much. It's like, I just think it's interesting the parallels here, because one is for Jalen Green and one's for Simmons, and if it's me, right, I'm taking Simmons over Jalen Green easily. I mean, obviously, I don't really have a lot of experience with points, but I just think the parallels between those two deals are really interesting. I feel like you could get Powell for a mid-first pretty easily. I feel like you could get Gafford for a mid-first pretty easily, which is essentially what was moved for Jalen Green. So it's really, to me, what was paid for both Jalen Green and Ben Simmons is pretty similar. So I just think it's interesting to hear, you know, one of them is pretty good, or they overpaid for Simmons, but the other one, oh no, we didn't overpay for Jalen Green.
Well, here's the thing, and you're absolutely right in those analyses, but I guess that's if we hone in on the picks, right? But I guess the reason we were saying this was an overpay was because of the subsequent parts of that pick, which is the whole Norman Powell and Daniel Gafford, and you know, especially if Porzingis doesn't play the rest of the season, like Gafford could have a sizable role going forward. But yeah, like we said, this we're talking about our initial reaction to where these values were at. But like we said, we think that the trade has aged pretty well, even though it's only been a week or two later. But that's how quick, you know, values change in fantasy.
This was pre-Nets trade in real life?
Well, this was right after the
No, it
Nets
was
trade.
post-Nets. Yeah.
It was right after the Nets trade.
Okay.
So,
I do think you raised a really interesting point in drawing that comparison of the two trades. I think the only argument probably as to why like the Simmons one can be seen as worse is larger contract, because this league is also salary. And Simmons, we've already seen, I would say, his peak, and he could maybe return to it, but we know what his ceiling is. And Jalen Green is so like what could he become? And he's a lot younger as well, right? I think he just turned 20. So
yeah, and that's the thing.
That's
Like, youth counts a lot more in Dynasty. Yeah, youth counts a lot more in Dynasty.
Yeah,
sure.
but, I mean, to your
But
point
I
about
feel you. I feel you, Bryce. Especially when I see your approach to fantasy, you never go too young ever. So you're definitely more of a safer player, where it's like you might grab some young guys, but generally your core of your team is very reliable, and you go with that reliable punt bill as well. So
right.
I definitely
That's
understand, especially with Ben Simmons. He fits exactly what you like to do.
So my favorite trade from March Madness and all the buzz, which by the way, just overall across the three leagues, like how great the amount of activity that we had. I think it was super fun. My favorite trade was Ethan deciding to finally trade away Jackson Hayes. And
oh my God.
everyone was just like,
Did
what?
you really?
Yeah, it's like you love
unbelievable.
Jackson Hayes, right? Like everyone who knows Ethan, who's been in like the core or bubble, knows that Ethan loves Jackson Hayes. And so right as he actually starts like playing well and contributing on the Pelicans, he decided to ship him away for some picks. I thought it was just the timing of it was just so perfect and very, very funny.
Man, I think that might have been the first trade ever in the court as far as player for player goes, which was, it was like Hayes or Kawhi and for Hayes essentially 3 years ago.
That was the first. Yeah, that was the
So
first.
3 years ago, Kawhi,
draft.
not now Kawhi.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. Is there any other trades I guess you guys want to highlight, or let's run through these playoffs scenarios real quick? You guys good?
We can
I
talk
think
about
those
that a
are
little
the
bit.
key. Yeah, I think those are the key March Madness ones. Let's keep going.
All right, cool. Let's jump right into the playoffs. So I will jump right into the bubble, and this is what I like to call the bubble rumble, because you never know what's about to go down, especially when we look at the two teams that people are keeping an eye on, with Lakeland Magic and the Wisconsin Herd. Currently they're at 15th, 16th, but likely Magic might jump up to the 14th or 13th seed. So with you guys sitting at the top, I know to me, Adrian, I think your team is the favorites. I think that's to everyone. And then just seeing Skyhawks and the Cruz, Brax team and Matumbo's team still at the, being one of the top contenders after making it to the finals is, kudos to them on staying consistent. In fact, you too, as Red Claws, you were up top last year as well. So kudos to all three of you guys. To me in the playoffs.
Round.
Yeah. To me, I feel like OKC should be in you guys' class. But after that Luka trade for Maxey and Bamba, although it was working out when Simmons was out, but now that they traded for Harden and whatnot, that takes away a lot from what Maxey could do. Although Bamba could still sustain his upside as a big man, but. Yeah, I just think just seeing that team with Luka would have been a lot more scarier going into the playoffs. But I mean, how do you guys feel with all this that I just mentioned, with the fear of Magic and Herd, and just where you guys are standing? I'll start with you, Adrian, since you're at the top.
Sure, yeah, and there's definitely some nerves on my end as far as what my first round matchup could look like, because we're talking about Herd, but I think also the 905 is down there and might actually beat out Herd to take that 16 seed, and I think I'll probably end up playing him.
Okay.
And I think he made a couple of late season kind of more win now trades. I think he got rid of Zion, and he's got a pretty deep team, right? He's got Derek White, McCollum, Horford, McCall Bridges, who's been on fire lately, Isaiah Stewart, we've talked about him a lot, and Anobi as well. So that's definitely not a very fun first round matchup.
McCollum is CJ. CJ and Derek White are pretty big with that trade deadline for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely some nerves on my end, and let's not forget the 905 made semis last year. And before he got bounced, I think, by Mutombo. So I think there's definitely some nerves on my end for some of those low seed teams who are going to be coming in and looking for an upset. How do you feel, Brax?
I mean, to touch on your point, I think you've overlooked the scenario where you can play Wisconsin Herd if he goes 8-1 against the Iowa Wolves this week, which seems well within the realm of possibility. The Iowa Wolves actually fall out, and Herd maintains that 16th seed. But yeah, I have a hard time believing you're worried about anybody, to be honest. It's a pretty dominant team you got going over there. And obviously we saw what happened last year, right? But, it's going to take somebody with a specific build, I think, to do something there.
I'll tell you, I think I looked over, and to be fair, it's only been, 4 days? I think for this current matchup so far, 905 would be beating me 6-3 or 5-4 or something like that. So I think there's definitely some valid nerves. All it takes is a bad scheduling week, a couple injuries, and your season's done. So I don't think you can take any game whatsoever for granted at come playoffs.
Go ahead, Kase.
Well, I was just going to add on top of what you guys were saying. It's just that I'm glad to be somewhere in the middle instead. Even though you guys are at the top, and you guys are supposed to have the easier matchups, but you guys, I'm glad to look at this and be like, okay, we can have some top teams taken out in the first round, and to see how that plays out. But what were you going to say, Brax?
I was actually going to touch on the same point you made, where it's like a couple of these, the teams that are going to be in the 14, 15, 16 range are, in my opinion, potentially a little bit scarier than some of the teams that are in that mid-round or mid-range.
Absolutely.
Definitely, because I'm looking at my range because I'm currently sitting at 8th, and I'm looking at two teams that I'm hoping I play, which is one, Delaware Bluecoats, because of what he said in the trade deadline, saying, "Hey, I'm probably not going to be in the playoffs, dog. Come get my good players." So just hearing that tone from him, I'm like, oh, I think he might be sleeping on his team a little bit on what he could do in that first round, but I'm definitely targeting that mentality going into the playoffs. And then another team. At first, I was kind of avoiding Stockton Kings, but as you guys highlighted, I guess in the beginning before we started this, was just how he has both AD and Chris Paul out right now. So that's another
team you want to play.
Yeah, so that's another team that I'm kind of hoping I could play. Barring I don't have injuries, and I know they're looking at me like, oh, I might want to play Seattle if Porzingis isn't playing. So it's interesting to be in this little bubble and see how competitive it will get. I know one team we're avoiding is probably Birmingham Squadron. I know he's looking pretty solid going into
he's
the
somebody
playoff.
I've liked since last year. When I was thinking, whenever he got healthy, he'd be a pretty solid team. And if Murray, I don't know if we heard a lot about Jamal Murray. But,
I don't think we have yet. But he does have Jamal Murray waiting in the wings.
If he's able to get to that second or third round and Murray's able to come back for a couple games, that could be huge.
I would say, to wrap up that bubble area, that 7th through 11th range or whatever, you definitely want you're targeting those two or maybe even my team in that range, and then you're definitely avoiding Squadron. You're probably avoiding Bayhawks, even though I wasn't avoiding him all that much looking at his playoff schedule. But the key is to not fall too low to where you're playing Long Island Nets and Mexico City Capitans in that first round. So that's the goal if you're in that range. Is there anything else you guys want to highlight in the bubble, or we can move on to March Madness? Because one thing I did mention in the bubble was how Stockton Kings was missing AD and CP3, and going ahead and seeing and looking at the March Madness, we highlighted how Wolverines, they were just having a conversation in Discord. Yeah, we were just having a conversation in Discord, and I think was it Jerome or someone called out yeah. Oh, yeah, Justin. Yeah, someone called out the Wolverines and said, "Hey, how you feeling right now?" So he's also missing AD and CP3, which the Stockton Kings, as we just discussed with the Stockton Kings in the other league. So that's an interesting parallel to see there. Is there anything? Well, I guess Adrian, are you paying much attention to the playoffs of March Madness? Because I know you're tanking there, right?
Well, yeah, I am taking. So I haven't, I'm not like in depth kind of analyzing, standings and things like that. But looking at it here, Case, actually, right now you're slotted to play the second seed.
Yeah.
You're in the 15th spot. So if I don't know if that'll hold up because we've got a couple potential tiebreakers that might change things.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
If you do end up playing him, you could have a pretty strong outing and upset in that first round, and at least make your money back heading to the second. So
definitely.
That should be exciting from your perspective.
Definitely, and I do feel like I could be higher in the standings because, to be honest, there were some nights that I kind of missed on some points that I could have started some guys, and that did cause me to lose a couple games. And I was injury riddled to begin the season with Ingram out, and Okongwu coming back is helping me a lot as well. So. There's how I traded for Levine, but that's the thing, Levine's knee, and I don't know how much he's going to play in the playoffs, so that's going to be a big.
I think he's coming back.
Okay.
He played in the All-Star game, so he should be coming back.
That's true.
Paul played in the All-Star game too. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Levine did say that he's going to come participate in All-Star activities, but I mean, his return after wasn't, I guess, guaranteed.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So, it'll be interesting. But yeah, I definitely. Yeah, I definitely saw what you highlighted in that I was currently in position to play against the injured Wolverines, but like I said, like the tiebreaker doesn't look like it's going to keep me there. I'm probably going to move up. And speaking of tiebreakers, what I did want to highlight is in Points League, just how you could be fooled by the record because we're just going on. You win this week and you lose this week. You go 1-0.
Right.
It doesn't say how much you lost.
Yeah, it's all or nothing. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's interesting to see how if you organize by fantasy points for and fantasy points against, you kind of you get a better value of how strong certain teams are. So
absolutely.
And like when I did the organizing, like it made me feel great about my team because if you organize points against, I think I have the most fantasy points against. So I'm like, oh, so
really?
So I probably had the hardest.
Oh yeah, you do.
Yeah, and then when you organize for points for, I'm actually a top 10 in the points for team in the points for category. So that had me feeling good going in, like regardless of who I played.
Another good one to look at is win streaks because what's interesting is
if you're going
things can change over the course of a season, right? Yeah, exactly. So you've got some injuries, or you made a trade to go more win now, or things like that. You look at a team like the Cal Poly Mustangs. Funny enough, the Wolverines have a 16 win streak, but the Mustangs have an 11 win streak, and the Eagles 9. And down below in the 9th seed, the Fighting Bees have an 8 win streak. So those could be some teams that you may not want to face because they're hot. I don't know, certain trades played out. Yeah, they're hot. So I think it'll be really, really interesting to see.
You definitely put me on game on there because I wasn't really paying attention to streaks as much. Because I was thinking that's more schedule based, but yeah, you definitely highlighted a great point there. And that like if someone's having like a 16 win streak, like you can't be looking at the schedule for that. Like that's like the odds of that being the schedule are very low. So yeah, that's but yeah, I guess that overall kind of leads to my overall point of just the seeding and records could kind of throw you off and how this playoffs is going to be pretty unpredictable. And just one thing I noticed is just the unpredictability of this format just reminds me of fantasy football, obviously because it's a points league. But yeah, just since it's a points league, it feels like it's almost like a hybrid fantasy football league to a degree. But yeah, I mean, overall, I know Brax he's quiet for a reason. He's not a fan of points leagues. I'm not a fan of points leagues myself, but this was intriguing, especially with the format that we had. And I've had fun so far. Yeah, so thanks for having me on there, Adrian. And I look forward to seeing how this league blossoms and where it goes.
Definitely, same here.
But yeah, I guess we could wrap this up and go over to the court. And the one thing that I noticed is that in comparison to the bubble is that there's a bigger win gap total in the bubble. But when I look at the teams and look at the details, it feels like there's a bigger talent gap in the court because as we just discussed in the bubble, like it's a Royal Rumble. You know what I'm saying? Like those top 4 teams could end up getting bounced based on how good those bottom teams are, and I don't feel as much the same way in the court. Did you want to elaborate that? I'll go over to Brax.
Yeah, I mean, I really like how, in I guess, for example, like in Bubble, there's a clear, like, first tier, second tier, third tier, whatever, right? But in here, it almost feels like the top 7, 8 teams are all in one tier together. So
Right.
I think that like all of them are, separated, 1, 2, 3, 4 games apart, games back from first place. And then you jump to the bottom half, and some of these teams in the bottom half can make some noise as well. Maybe point out myself a little bit. I had a really rough stretch of about 3 weeks with like DeRozan went down with COVID, Jimmy Butler was out, Gobert was out. So like I tumbled in the standings, right? But I feel like I can win the whole thing, and I'm sitting at 12th right now. So I think maybe more so, more parity in here right now compared to
way more parity.
Bubble, which is interesting because the whole reason for salary, I guess, or part of the reason is to increase parity. So I think we've done a good job in the court, at least to this point, which with the parity between teams, which is a huge concern for some people a couple of years ago. But right now, I really like where the league is at. So.
And to tag on to that's the whole reason I'm tanking. I mean, part of my decisions is part of why I'm tanking. But just looking at the landscape of the league, it was getting ugly, dog. Like, especially when Adrian came in and started making his trades. Oh, here we go, another Chuck. You know what I'm saying? So that court was looking like it was going to get ugly and very top heavy. So it's nice that you mentioned the whole parity part and how certain teams stay strong through that weather and whatnot. So Adrian,
the only team I was going to say that is not a threat is Ben, because this is sort of similar in Bubble where he decided to blow it up now, and he's sitting in 13th right now, but he traded away like all of his good pieces. So whoever gets him is basically getting a bye in the first round. But other than that one, like any team you hit like could be interesting.
Do you remember that trade that first trade he did that kind of sparked that chat to go kind of crazy?
It was AD for Cam Reddish and RJ Barrett.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So that trade did AD, right?
Anthony Davis. Yep.
Wow. So it's interesting how that trade even aged. You know what I'm saying? Because
this was like probably a month ago, I think.
Yeah. Because I know we kind of like shelled on him for trading away AD, like making that rebuild move in the midst of the playoffs starting. So to see him move away from AD, and sometimes when we have this logic of I want to move away from an injury prone player, it's funny to see I was right. So I know that's probably how he's feeling on his end, and but yeah, it just didn't make sense at the time to trade for 2 guys that weren't really playing as well or whatnot, and a guy that could be like a top 4 guy for you in the playoff span, so. Right.
I think especially with no salary, it was definitely something you probably could have gone a little bit more of at the time. But yeah, with Davis's injury woes, like, every time I see these, out for 2 weeks, out for 3 weeks, like, it's just like, yep, here we go again. Like, this is your classic Anthony Davis. So, I think again here, Barrett, Reddish, both Knicks. I think he plays hard into, liking his favorite team and the players on it. So, I think after that one, I then did a massive trade with him, where he sent me, Lowry, Vooch, Melo, Conley, and I sent him Capella and some picks and other pieces. So, really going hard into the youth movement. He brought in Kobe White, traded away Capella that I gave him, and it's since gone big into making some adjustments. So he's definitely not a playoff threat at this point, and went hard into going young to improve long term.
Okay, for sure. But yeah, I don't really have comments on the playoff race in the court. I don't really care. I'm tanking, dog. Y'all have a blast.
It's a free for all. That basically sums it up. It's going to be a free for all. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how it plays out. I'm very excited.
Oh, okay. Did you guys have any more comments on this, or are we good?
I think I'm probably good.
I'm good too. So I guess to wrap this up, this is opinions, not facts. Anything you disagree with, leave us a comment, send a message. Always willing to debate and see other perspectives. And next episode, we should be in the midst of the playoffs, so we'll have some contenders on that episode to talk more about it. I mean, I know we have contenders here, but I mean, we'll see who we end up having it. But with that being said, thank you for listening to Kase Court Podcast. It's your boy Kase, the realest basketball fan alive, and I'm here with your boys Brax and Adrian, and we out.
I've been killing all these suckers where they at, man. Seeing through your cat, cause my vision is a CAT scan. Trying to get up in the game like I'm Pac-Man, so I'm blacking out on the track like I'm Batman. Call me Captain, always gotta look for him. Beat so tight, I almost put a hook on it. Verse so fire, I almost put a cook on it. Had this shit jumping, looking like I put a foot on it. Got 100 on the dash when I book Sonic. Only game that I play, got a rook on it. Got to flow so hard that it looks solid. Y'all be cynical, pitiful, read a book, college. Running the day with punting like Weezy, your baby stunting to Satan. I'm paying nothing to sofa like David Ruffin. All these niggas gossip about, get why they hating them. I ain't singing to these bitches, I leave that shit to Drake and them. Pull up in the all black, but I never was saving them. I was probably just slaying them, nigga barely was dating them. I can do this till I'm 50 cause I rap with the cars. You gon' quit it when you 30 cause you rap in the cars. Swear your shit up the song. I've been killing all these suckers where they at, man. Seeing through your cat, cause my vision is a CAT scan. Trying to get up in the game like I'm Pac-Man, so I'm blacking out on the track like I'm Batman. I've been killing all these suckers where they at, man. Seeing through your cat, cause my vision is a CAT scan. Trying to get up in the game like I'm Pac-Man, so I'm blacking out on the track like I'm Batman. I've been rolling dolo on them, I don't need me no robbing, so I be running through paper that be thick but no robbing. Man, I grew up in the city where them niggas be robbing. I ain't stressing, I ain't messing with a bird like a robin. Many niggas acting reckless, I approach it with caution. Finessing how I move, but go harder than Rodman. Even at the bottom, I reach up for the top, man. This is how you elevate from worker to the boss, man. I ain't Mike Posner, I ain't posting too often, but I'm trying to run the map from LA out to Boston. Relationship goes, what the hell is she talking? I'm just trying to bang goals, something like Andy Dalton. Niggas say they ballin', well, how much did it cost? And I ain't talking LA, but these niggas be dodging. Looking for the competition, feeling like I done lost them. Cause it's murder that I wrote, caught a coroner's chalk, and don't get lost in the sauce, fam. Suckers where they at, man. Seeing through your cat, cause my vision is a CAT scan. Trying to get up in the game like I'm Pac-Man, so I'm blacking out on the track like I'm Batman. I've been killing all these suckers where they at, man. Seeing through your cat, cause my vision is a CAT scan. Trying to get up in the game like I'm Pac-Man, so I'm blacking out on the track like I'm Batman. 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 Blacking out on the track like I'm Batman.